Lior Ron of the Google Maps team, and Steve Lee of Google Latitude. Please welcome them up.
Thanks, Brady. A pleasure to be here again, and a pleasure for Google to be here for the 5th year, I think, since we started in 2005. And it wasn't so long ago. This is actually not a prehistoric map. It's a Google map from 2005, from the first Web 2.0. And this is basically the US and the UK swimming in an ocean of unmapped territory only 4 years ago. This is, again, a traveling time machine, the first mashup of Paul housing maps that sort of paved the way for all the mashups to follow and showed us what we can build from the very early days of the GeoWeb. So a lot have passed since then, and we wanted to talk today about some of the exciting, significant improvements that have happened over the last couple of months, which sort of paved the way for a new GeoWeb. And we want to talk about those building blocks that will construct the new GeoWeb and will allow us to build a host of new applications on top of this new infrastructure. So the first one, going back to the Google Maps picture from 2005, is the base map. And we started from, you saw, a very limited base map and basically an uncharted territory, like the early cartographers, where most of the world is not available digitally as a base map for annotation. And we've been very focused since the early days on empowering users to map the world. Since the early days of the Keyhole BBS community, allowing quick annotations on top of Google Earth, going through the launch of My Maps to allow annotation on top of My Maps, going through the acquisition of Panoramio to allow users to create a global photo layer of annotated, geo-annotated photos, 3D warehouse to allow those users to create 3D models of those places, and then taking the final steps of actually opening up our local results for users to edit last year, and then the final step of completely opening everything on Google Maps for users to edit with the launch of Google Map Maker a couple of months ago. And we were amazed to see what users can do with those wiki tools. This is where we are to date. We are globally launched with the wiki abilities in 190 different countries across the globe, and most of Google Maps across the world are now open for users to edit and add their own local knowledge to improve the quality and accuracy and depth of the base map. And I wanted to share with you some of the amazing accomplishments that we saw from users over the last couple of months. This is a map maker in Little Tobago, a small island just north of Tobago. And this guy basically went single-handedly and mapped every point in the very complex shoreline of Little Tobago, more than 500 points, to have a very accurate representation by a single user of an island in the middle of the ocean. This guy is more passionate about golf and just went to some deserted golf course in the middle of the Caribbean and mapped hole by hole, all 18 holes with a very deep level of accuracy. And this is now on Google Map Maker and on Google Maps. An Argentinian user chose to map all of the one-way streets in his hometown one by one to create this fantastic mesh of driving directions in the city. And my favorite example is a map maker that was not deterred by the constant cloud coverage near the equator and just went there on Ivory Coast and mapped using GPS and using educated guesses underneath the satellite coverage his entire city single-handedly on Google Map Maker. So this is what you get from individual users. And when you start to sum up what they're doing, you're getting a global scale of things that happen. So let us zoom into Pakistan, and that's a city just south of Islamabad. And this is what happened to the city the week after we opened Google Map Maker in that city. Basically, users are taking ownership and mapping the city from scratch. Roads, POIs, railroads, rivers, everything within 7 days after the initial launch. So that's Pakistan, but it's really happening globally. Another example, a city in the Philippines, Lapu City, again, mapped from scratch, an island within days after the launch, completely mapped with rivers, the exact coastline, canals passing through the islands, airport. It happens in India as well, where this is Madurai in India, which was, again, completely mapped within months by users with a lot of detail and depth that you can actually not get from any other source beside the power of local users and the local experts that are there on the ground. Another example in South America, Santiago, Chile, again, mapped from scratch. That's what we had when we launched Google Map Maker a couple of months ago, and this is what we have today on Google Maps. Again, a very rich, collaborative effort. When you sum all of those together, and even before that, it's not only for the developing world, it's also applicable for the developing world. And this is an example of San Francisco, where we opened not the base map, but allowed users to annotate, edit local listings, points of interest, and addresses. And within just a few months, this is what happened. So those are all the edits that we have collected from users using the wiki abilities on Google Maps just over the last few months. And you can see that although we think that the base map is accurate and up to date, there's a lot to still fix, add, and I'm personally, every user with his own passion. I'm adding all the tennis courts in San Francisco. Other users are mapping police stations, and one by one, we have a much better coverage of base map. When you sum all of this together on a global scale, that's what you get. So that's a snapshot of all the roads contributed by users since the launch of Google Map Maker just 8-9 months ago. And this is globally available today in 164 countries. And we're actually very delighted to be able to push those updates through the collaborative nature and through the filtering process of the community and self-moderation to Google Maps after those edits have been verified. So beginning yesterday, we actually have data live on Google Maps from 99 countries of map makers of data created in Google Map Maker. So that's the power of users. Of course, we always strive to make this data universally accessible and useful. We've opened this in the API for developers to have access to the freshest map data and be able to create Maps API site on top of them. We've provided direct access to the up-to-date map data directly from MapMaker, even before it's being published to Google Maps, so developers and contributors can have direct access to the data. And lastly, we just announced a month ago a pilot, and we started with Kenya, of providing this data as downloadable license for non-commercial purposes, and essentially giving this data for any nonprofit, NGO, government organization that want to consume this data in its own tools and make some use of it, because we know that not all of the use cases are covered by our API, and there's a lot of need for offlining processing, JS processing, and other use cases that could benefit more from a downloaded license. So that's a photo I took while I was in Kenya, traveling last month for that event, and those we had about 300 representatives from government agencies, NGOs, nonprofits, downloading the data, training on the tools, and now actively engaged in local mapping in Kenya. And for me personally, the way it touched me is after the event, I took a couple of days off and went to a safari in the Masai Mara, and Unfortunately, the driver was fairly new, and the Masai Mara could be quite confusing, so we actually got lost in the second day. And here I was in the middle of the Masai Mara in Kenya, navigating my Safari driver with my BlackBerry device, with maps contributed by local users in Kenya in MapMaker, shown on Google Maps Mobile, that actually knew my location without having a GPS, and I was able to just navigate this driver back safely to the camp. So to tell us a bit more about the magic of actually knowing the location without having a GPS, allow me to introduce Steve Lee, which is heading our Google Maps mobile and location efforts. Steve?
Thank you, Lior. I started at Google roughly 3 years ago, and one of the first meetings I had, I sat down with an engineer named Mike Chu, who's really the inspiration behind a lot of what I'm going to speak to today. And he spoke of a vision in which Google had a unique opportunity to create a location platform and not make it just available to Google, but make it freely available and accessible to third-party developers as well, and ultimately to millions of consumers. And he got up and drew on a whiteboard a block diagram similar to what you see here. And I guess it makes me really happy to be able to speak to it today. And it's not just a vision, but it's a reality. And so what Google's done over the past couple of years is take 4 primary data sources of location, sort of the tried and true IP location, a cell tower location database, a Wi-Fi location database, as well as an assisted GPS server. And that comprises Google's location service, which has now been made available. There's about roughly a dozen Google products or properties it uses, and thousands of third-party applications are now using this location service. Another critical part, beyond just taking a location or building a location platform to make location truly accessible, not only to third-party developers, to consumers as well, is partnerships. And Google has a number of high-profile partnerships with several different types of partners, with operators throughout the world, such as T-Mobile and Vodafone, with major handset manufacturers such as Apple, Palm, and Sony Ericsson, and browser manufacturers, like the recently announced Mozilla partnership with Google for bringing Wi-Fi-based location to the browser. There's 2 really important reasons for these partnerships. One, no matter how good your location platform is, it doesn't help developers and consumers if it's not distributed and available to those consumers. So through these partnerships, we're able to bring this location to many different types of devices, from laptops to different phones. A second key part of this partnership, or these partnerships, is that it enables us to maintain and improve our service over time by doing anonymous location data collection, which is very important to the entire ecosystem to maintain that high-quality location platform. So let me quickly take you through a timeline of different, sort of the innovation over the past 1.5 to 2 years from Google in the space of location. In the fall of 2007 was a big milestone in which we launched the My Location feature as part of Google Maps on mobile phones. And it is a major milestone because it really was the first large-scale deployment of a feature that used cell tower-based location. And in Lior's example, he found himself in Africa without a GPS phone and was still able to locate himself. And now today, tens of millions of users of Google Maps for mobile are able to enjoy the benefit of that feature. Around the same time, we announced the Location API as part of the Android SDK, and clearly stating in our intentions that this location platform would be available to third parties as well to build third-party applications. And in fact, for the Android SDK Challenge, in which third-party developers build applications, many of the winners ended up being location-based services and using this Location API. In 2008, Apple brought location and the My Location feature to Google Maps on the iPhone. They used Skyhook's Wi-Fi location database and Google's cell tower location database for that feature. And then later that summer, Apple announced their SDK with the Location API. And from that point, there's been thousands of applications developed for the iPhone that use location. So truly a lot of innovation just in the past year. Later on that summer, Google brought location to the browser on desktop computers. And Google did that through Google Gears by adding a new API, a geolocation API, to Google Gears. And at the same time, we announced our own Wi-Fi location database as well. Later, we announced a Google mobile app, which is just another Google application, search application that uses location. Then this year, in February, we announced Google Latitude, which is a great application that's using this location platform that not only lets you see your own location, but if you choose to do so, you can share your location with your friends and family. And one thing that Latitude sort of marked as a pivot point is not only location, not a great application just on mobile phones for location, but also bringing it to the desktop. Because in addition to having the Latitude feature on Google Maps for mobile, we also created an iGoogle gadget for Latitude, which uses Google Gears to get a user's Wi-Fi location. So whether you're at a Starbucks or at home or work, we can automatically identify where you are and share that with your friends if you've opted in to do so. And that brings us to the most recent announcement a few weeks ago with Mozilla, which is really a critical point of bringing location to the desktop, and that it's not just a part of Google Gears anymore, but the API that's in Gears helped provide the foundation for the new HTML5 spec for geolocation, which is found in Firefox 3.5, and Google is going to be the default location provider in Firefox 3.5. So it's really bringing location to the masses beyond just Google Gears. And let me show a demo. So the culmination of all these building blocks of building a Wi-Fi location database, developing these APIs for the browser, dealing with sensitive privacy issues, and also getting the distribution, not just in Gears, but also in Chrome and in Firefox, and hopefully more and more browsers. This is a sneak preview of showing my location on Google Maps. And you'll notice there's a new button here, the My Location button. And when I click on it, you go to our location here in San Jose at the Fairmont Hotel. And so I don't know how many of you are tired of seeing the entire map of the United States when you go to Google Maps. Now you can click a button and take you to exactly where you're at, making your local searches nearby and driving directions and other tasks much more seamless and easy. Now this was in Firefox 3.5. Let's move over to Chrome. And you'll see the exact same Google Maps experience with the My Location dot. I click on it, and again, it takes us to where we're located. So I think by showing this both in Firefox and in Chrome, it really shows that this location is becoming ubiquitous. And I think the time is now for developers of not just mobile applications, but also desktop applications, to add location to their applications and really take it to the next level. I'd like to wrap up by going back to the video that Lior showed earlier. And again, this is in an area of Pakistan. And about a year ago, I found myself in India, in Dharamshala, which is in northern India, just east of the area we're showing here. It's where the Dalai Lama resides. And I had my BlackBerry with me without GPS and Google Maps. And I had a similar experience to Lior, and that is a truly magical experience being able to locate myself in such a seemingly remote area. And so what you see here in the video is that same area of Pakistan. And over time, since we launched the My Location feature, the growth of our cell tower location database for location. And you can see it growing over time. In fact, today, it's very pervasive throughout the world, and we have over 90% coverage throughout the world. That covers all countries, all carriers, as well as all different radio networks such as 3G, 2G, and CDMA. So it's really pervasive today. So that's a quick summary of what we're doing in location. And now Lior and I have spoken to two of the base layers, map data and location data. And I'm going to turn it back over to Lior to speak about what can be built on top of that.
Thanks, Steve. So we have base map, we have location. Steve is asking what can we build on top of it, and the answer is a lot. I've tried to generate a new heat map of the GeoWeb. We sort of give every year the state of the GeoWeb. John was here on stage last year and showed you this nice animation of how the content that we call on the GeoWeb is going. I was trying to do the same sort of heat map this year, but the heat map was too hot. Basically, the dots were all over the map. So this is a poor representation of how we actually perceive the GeoWeb today. This is, again, all the GeoBits, KML, GeoRSS, shapefiles, every geo format, lat and long, that we can find in the web aggregate. And when John was on stage here last year, we had around, I would say, 40, 50 million of those on the web. A year passed, and we're now at 500 million. So just over a year, the size of the GeoWeb has more than 10 times bigger, and it's actually still doubling itself almost every 3 months. And the growth with new sensors coming and richer base maps and location is just phenomenal. And we're trying to introduce more ways to organize and access this data. One specific feature that we've introduced a few months ago is the ability to search for maps as data sets rather than individual places or points. This is an example of Mass.js publishing all of their JS data on the web. Again, going back to last year, we've discussed the combination of ESRI and Google working together to encourage GIS publishers to publish their data into the web. This is one of the examples of many geo servers that are starting to emit this deep hidden JS data to the web, either from ESRI or OpenGeo server or a lot of other JS servers that are allowing their publishers to just publish with one click of the button their content to the web. And we actually have nowadays over 70 million different JS data sets available on the web. Here's one example. And long gone are the days where you have to knock on the doors of state departments and ask them for their data sets. The data set is just there available. For example, if I want to have access to all the police stations in the state, I just click, I search for police stations, and I'm getting a complete JS data set of all those police stations published directly from the JS server of that state. So that's just one example of the ability to search for collection. A more sort of average user example is searching for my maps and more consumer-friendly maps. This is swine flu maps, and if you just type swine flu maps into Google Maps today, you get a bunch of maps, collaborative maps that were created over the last few weeks to try and capture in real time updates from all over the world about swine flu incidents. And this is one example of an open collaborative map updated in real time by hundreds of users across the world and being searchable on Google Maps. So this is all great, but still we feel that the barrier to entry to the GeoWeb, the barrier to publish data is too high. You need to have a geo database, you need to have some programmatic geo ability, you need to have maybe a geo search engine if you want to search for your data, and we're very committed to reduce the barrier to entry and allow more users and more developers to participate in this effort. So we're very pleased to announce today the Google Maps Data API, which is launching today. And essentially, the Google Maps Data API is a G-Data API, a Google Data API to create, store, update geo information in the cloud. And that's essentially giving developers, starting today, and this is the URL for documentation, the ability to programmatically create my maps, update them, edit them, show them on different interfaces, do batch edits, store custom geo information, custom attributes in the cloud, on Google infrastructure, and basically relieving developers from the duty of maintaining all of this data on their server. We're going to provide the hosting. We're going to provide the geo abilities to access this data, and hopefully that will ease the development and create new exciting stuff. Some of those, let's walk through some examples based on this building block and the previous building blocks that we've just covered. One example is PlayShell. PlayShell is today, you all know PlayShell, one of the biggest mashup sites on the web. PlayShell today is relaunching, completely migrated on top of the G.API, meaning they're storing all their maps on Google infrastructure and accessing this data from PlayShell to the GeoStore in the cloud, providing the ability to read the data, update it, and do anything they want from their context on their side. Another example, Connector Local, the ability to upload your own My Maps from your account while you're creating new places. Again, both PlayShell and Connector Local are based on the G.API, but also fully location aware, going back to Steve's point about location. And then other type of application this enables is mobile apps. And this is one example of MyTracks, an app that tracks your location, stores it in the G.API, publish it directly to My Maps so you can view your outdoor activities in the comfort of your desktop after you finish your run or walk or whatever trek you perform. And we're hoping that those building blocks will enable a lot of new applications, collaborative, rich applications of annotations being built around this ecosystem. So we've talked about base map, location, annotations. I still feel there's one elephant in the room that we need to address, and it's money. So we always have these panels, Brady, every year I saw of us discussing how can we actually make money of the ecosystem, and we bring a bunch of experts and they talk, and I don't know if we always conclude, yes, we don't really know how the ecosystem will make money. So I saw that we don't have this panel today. I'm hoping that it doesn't mean that we've gave up on answering this question, because I do think that we have a much better answer that we used to have for the monetization story. And basically, we've developed over the last couple of months, carefully iterating with partners and with advertisers, two abilities under the sort of AdSense for Google Maps API umbrella that allow API sites and developers to monetize their sites. The first one being the local search on your map with ads, which we've launched a couple of months ago, which is just allowing sites to embed a Google search bar and allow users to do local searches from within the context of the API site without switching context to other local search engines and leaving the application. And a quick example of that will be my good friend Steve here sent me an invite for tonight. We're going to have a nice Web 2.0 after party in the Google campus. But unfortunately, as you know, we had some cutbacks lately, so we cut down on cafeterias. And I think I'll have to provide some food for your party. So I want to go to Evite, look at the invite, but while doing that, also search for pizzas on the way and seeing pizza places that I can actually pick up a pizza on my way to Steve's party, or seeing relevant targeted ads for my searches on the API site that will be rev shared, of course, with the developer and will give a good monetization story if your users are actually doing searches on your site. So that's one solution of the AdSense family that we have. The next one, if your users are not doing searches, if they're just browsing the map, is the ability to target ads for users that are just browsing the map and looking at different viewports. And that's our second offering, which we're launching today, which is geo-targeted Google Maps ad unit. And this is basically adding an ad unit, a block, wherever you want on your site, a block of ads that are accurately geo-targeted based on users' use of the map, of their browsing, their panning, their zooming, based on their clicks, based on how users interact with the map. Our engine is able to interpret those actions and derive very targeted, very efficient ads. And one example for this will be Acme Mapper, and here I am looking at Napa Valley, and while I'm just looking in the map, I'm getting very relevant ads for the viewport which I'm looking at. And if I'll pan, I'll get different ads, or if I'll go to another place, Orlando, Florida, I'll get relevant ads for Orlando. And I can show how many ads I want. And again, those are very targeted based on the viewport and the user actions. And we have been iterating with partners over the last couple of months, and I have to say we are very pleased with the results and the monetization revenue coming from this. And basically, we think it's a win-win for all stakeholders in this ecosystem. It's a win for API sites and publishers to be able to actually monetize. It's a win for users because this is actually adding value to the user experience, a very relevant content that is on top of the regular user experience. And it's a win for advertisers that are getting very targeted geo ability to target the distributed network of API sites and get to those long tail of sites. So that's the monetization story. And I think basically we covered all 4 building blocks. So we're very excited about the rich base map, and we're working to allow more and more access to that. We're very excited by the location platform that Steve talked about and transforming the way we develop apps to include location from day one. We have a good story on creating an annotation platform and reducing the barrier to entry. And lastly, the ability to monetize. So we've been very excited by those developments, and we're really looking forward for the next 4 or 5 years and see what type of apps will be built with this new Geoweb and those new building blocks that are being built as we speak. Thanks.